Hi guys, welcome back to the Shackles of Debt, where we talk about money tips, financial literacy, and debt freedom. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. All of the links for everything, including social medias, will be down below. Today, I want to talk about how much it cost me to move to New Zealand. So I want to talk about the costs involved with the registration process for nursing, as well as the visa registration process. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a timeline from the beginning, from me getting my job all the way to the end, me arriving. And in between that, I'm going to talk about the nursing registration process. So if you're looking to move to New Zealand, this is roughly what you can do. Again, my journey is going to be slightly different to yours. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about that particular timeline, as well as the costs that were involved at each of the stages. So just a disclaimer before I begin, I was a single applicant from England. So I'm only going to be speaking about it from that particular perspective of a single person applying after having done their nursing degree in England. So if you're from a different country, it might be a slightly different process. Same if you're traveling with a family or a partner, it will be a slightly different process. And that will be up to you to figure out how that worked. But hopefully this will give you a rough idea of what to expect and a rough idea of some of the costs that might be involved. So I've written down this whole timeline as well as the costs that were involved. So if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. Also, another thing before I forget, the way and the order in which I did my particular application and move is completely different. And again, remember, I'm not an immigration advisor. So please don't sue me if you follow my advice and it doesn't work. Please always contact a qualified professional. Before we begin, And also another thing before I forget, is that I did this all by myself. I didn't have an immigration advisor. I didn't want to pay for that cost. So I got pretty much all of my information from Google and I figured it out from there. Right, so now let's begin. The first thing I did, or the first thing that happened, was that I came across the job advert on NHS Jobs. So yes, one day I was just browsing, looking for jobs, and I saw an advert for one of the district health boards down here in New Zealand that were advertising for all kinds of nurses. So what I did was I sent in an email expressing my interest. And what then happened was about 3-4 days later, the HR people from that particular district health board got in contact with me. They arranged for me to have an initial telephone call with my particular employer. Now, I'm not going to say where I'm working or which DHB I'm going to be working at, but it was one of the DHBs within New Zealand. But yes, so we arranged for that phone call to happen. So a few days later, so this was 11 days later, I had my first phone call with my prospective employer. So what it was just basically us having a chat about some of my reasons for applying, like why I wanted to move. For them, they needed to see that I was going to be a serious candidate and that if I started this process, that I was actually going to carry through with it. And also for me, it was an opportunity for me to ask some questions about the places where I might be working, or just how nursing in New Zealand differs to nursing over in England. And I think, that was a very, very good phone call. So we all knew where we stood based on that particular initial call. The next thing that happened was a job interview. And the job interview happened 2 weeks after the initial telephone call with the recruiter. They said that they couldn't recruit me for a specific vacancy because it could often take anything from 12 to 18 months to 2 years from the beginning of the process to someone actually moving. What they said was it would be a general nursing interview, but in terms of where I'd be working, I would find out much later down the line, once the time sort of for me getting here approached. So I had the job interview. Yeah, it happened at 9 o'clock at night because over here, they're 11 hours ahead. So they were really lovely in sort of accommodating that. So yeah, it was nighttime for me, and it was, first thing in the morning here. And the interview lasted about half an hour to 45 minutes. I'd done some preparing. And another thing I should also say that I'm a mental health nurse. All of the questions were specific to mental health because that's what I will be doing over here, but I wasn't sure in what capacity just yet. So luckily I heard from them pretty soon afterwards, and they said that I'd gotten the job, that I'd been a successful candidate, which was fantastic, absolutely fantastic news. And so after being offered the job, I then received my job contract. So within the job contract, I was offered a relocation package. Now, a relocation package is where an employer sort of either subsidizes or pays for some of the costs towards you relocating in exchange for you working with that employer for a certain period of time. And that's how mine was. They offered me a relocation package, which was really, really lovely. And to be fair, because of that relocation package, it made the move that much easier for me. And also at this point, I hadn't even started my nursing registration yet. So I wasn't yet registered or qualified to work in New Zealand. But what they said was my offer would be provisional. And then when I get my nursing registration, it would then be unconditional. I think that's the word. Just to recap, I did my expression of interest. I had an initial call with my prospective employer. I then had a job interview, and I was then offered the job. So the next thing for me was to apply for my nursing registration. If you're an internationally qualified nurse and you want to work in New Zealand, the first thing you need to do is to have your credentials and your identity verified by the CGFNS. It is a bit of a mouthful. So what the CGFNS basically do, they authenticate and they verify your nursing credentials as well as your identity. And the process basically checks out what your work experience is. It determines that you are who you say you are. It basically sees whether or not you are eligible to work as a nurse in New Zealand. The CGFNS registration fee costs me £240. And again, I'm going to be saying these in pounds instead of New Zealand dollars, because that's how I was able to work it out in my head. So how the CGFNS work is that after you register, you get given a form, and you need to give this form to your previous employers, to your university where you did your nursing degree, and any other relevant schools. So what you do is you send them this form, and they're basically meant to fill it out and to confirm that you are who you say you are, that you worked there in the period that you worked there. And they are supposed to mail this to the CGFNS headquarters over in America. So this is one of the longest parts of the whole process. And it was particularly challenging because I was dealing with my previous employers. Some of them, they were just being very difficult, and all they had to do was just fill out a form and to post it, but they were being very difficult. So I had to do a lot of chasing, and you'll find that you have to do a lot of chasing. Another thing that made the process long was that my university at the time was closed because England was in another lockdown, and that just extended the whole process. Other things I had to pay for were to get my driver's license and my passport notarized. So that cost me £40, but I found out that I could have got it done for £5 from the post office. Another thing I had to do was I had to contact the NMC, which is the Nursing and Midwifery Council. I had to ask them to send over what's called a certificate of registration. So basically just showing that I am currently a registered nurse in England and how many years I've been registered for. But I had to pay, how much did I pay? I paid £34 for that one. It wasn't too bad, but it's still, every penny ended up adding up, and you'll see, what the total cost was in the end. The next thing I had to pay for was for my university to send my transcript. Yeah, my uni basically said I needed to pay £40 in order to get them to send my transcript over to the CGFNS, which I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. I studied there. All you need to do is just send over my transcript. I'm like, how difficult difficult is that? So I started the CGFNS process on the 26th of September 2020, and the whole process was finally completed on the 23rd of December 2020. So that was 4 months. Bear in mind, these 4 months were just spent chasing up previous employers, chasing up my uni, chasing up NMC. So it's a lot of chasing up, and it can be quite frustrating sometimes. So once the CGFNS have got all your paperwork there, what they do is they compile a report, and then they send this report to the New Zealand Nursing Council. So my report was sent over to the New Zealand Nursing Council on Christmas Day 2020. And then on the 4th of January 2020, I was contacted by the New Zealand Nursing Council, and they invited me to apply for New Zealand registration. So the application for the New Zealand nursing registration cost me £269.43. And once your application goes over to the New Zealand Nursing Council, I forgot which way around it is, but I think it's 20 working days for them to allocate a case officer. And then after allocating a case officer, it's 30 working days to your application for registration being approved or denied. So for me, I think it was about a month. I think it was right on the 20 working days for my application to be allocated to a case officer. And after it was allocated to a case officer, it then took about 6 weeks. It was about, I would say it was more than 30 working days. From what I remember, it was a very, very long time of just waiting. And I even sent them an email asking if everything was okay. And they said that they had a backlog of applications, etc., etc. Another thing I had to do was to get a background police check. And that cost £94.75. And this was an international police check. That took about 2 weeks to come back, and it's only valid for 6 months. Finally, on the 15th of April, so from January to April, my New Zealand nursing registration was finally approved. So I could now legally work as a nurse in New Zealand. Just to recap the timeline, I first did the CGFNS application on the 26th of September 2020, and it was only on the 15th of April that my nursing registration was finally approved. So that was September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April. 7 months. One thing that I would recommend is that you need a lot of patience. You need to have a lot of patience because this was the longest part of the whole process. I then had to pay for an annual practice certificate. So this is basically New Zealand's equivalent of nursing NMC fee that we have to pay every year. So this annual practice certificate costs £71.33, and that just basically means, yes, I am legally allowed to work, I am legally registered, etc., etc. So at this point, I now have my nursing registration and I now have my job offer. I could then go and apply for a visa. At the moment, due to the pandemic, New Zealand have got restrictions on their borders and their border entry and who can come in, etc., etc. But one of the exceptions are critical workers. And me as a mental health nurse, I was allowed to come and visit because I'll be here for a critical purpose, which was, to nurse, I guess. But in order for me to apply for that particular visa, it's called a critical purpose visitor visa, I needed to have my nursing registration and I needed to have my job offer, both of which I now had. So now let's get down to the visa. Right, so before I could even apply for the visa, what I had to do was I had to send in an expression of interest. And that basically said that, I intend to apply for this visa because I am a healthcare worker and I'm going to be coming to New Zealand for an X number of years or an X number of months, etc., etc. And that expression of interest cost me £23.26. So 2 days after I sent in my expression of interest, I then received an invitation to apply for the critical purpose visitor visa. Now with the critical purpose visa, you can either get a 6-month or a 12-month one. And if you intend to stay in New Zealand for longer than 6 months, you need a medical check. So that's what I ended up doing. I did a comprehensive medical check, which checked out if I had TB, it did a X-ray, bloods, physical health check. And that cost me £300. Oh my God. Oh, that's expensive. But the medical check was, very quick. The report came back within 2 days. And another thing I also had to do for my visa was to get another police check. Like, they wouldn't accept my police check that I'd just done for nursing because they needed their own people to do it. And this police check cost me £64. It actually costs £55 if you want it within like a month. But I did like a rushed service where it will be done within 12 working days. So I paid a bit extra and that cost me £64. So after everything had come back, after my medical had come back, after my police check had come back, I then finally did my application for my critical purpose visitor visa. I sent in my application and that cost £120. So I submitted my visa application on the 11th of May 2021 and my visa was approved on the 18th of May. So it only took 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it only took 7 days for my visa to come through, which I'm really, really grateful for that wasn't a long wait. In total, the whole application from CGFNS, New Zealand Nursing Council fees, all of the police checks, transcript requests, getting my documents notarized, visa applications, medical. The grand total was, drumroll, £1,296.77 for me to do this whole thing. Which, to be fair, I think that's quite reasonable. I think that's quite fair enough. It is what it is and I'm here nonetheless and I'm really, really grateful for that. And for me, I didn't have to pay for like any moving costs, etc. because all I did was bring 2 suitcases and a bit of hand luggage because it's just me. But, if you've got family, if you've got pets, dogs, whatever it is, you're probably gonna have to pay extra to do the transportation for that. And I'm really lucky that my employer actually paid for my plane ticket. So that also saved me a little bit of money in that regards. Is there anything else that you wanna know? Are you currently in the process of registering as a nurse? Or have you done this before? Let's have a conversation in the comments. And again, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and to check out my blog and my other social medias. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.